Hey everybody, Kripparrian here. This video is going to go over the basic skills required to do the maximum DPS for each class, and it assumes that you know the basics of your class, so it's not going to discuss gears, gems, spells, keybinds, anything like that. The greatest impact to DPS is how you play. It's not really gear or talents or anything like that, and this is evident because when you look at the top damage parses for a particular class, you're going to see a very large variation. And if gear and talents and all that stuff was what made the best of each class the best, everyone would be at a very similar level, which you can see that is not the case. So firstly, what is DPS? DPS is maximizing your globals, maximizing the number of spells that you can cast during a given time period during an encounter. And secondly, it's how much damage you can deal with each of those abilities that you use. Maximizing those two factors is the key to doing the top DPS. The first thing you need to know when maximizing the amount of spells you can cast, maximizing your globals, is the spell that you're going to use one global or more before you use it. So you're not reacting to what you've already done, you're reacting to what you're going to be doing. In other words, if you're casting something, before that cast finishes, you want to know precisely which spell you're going to be casting after that. For instance, if I just started casting a steady shot and I see that my aim shot is up 3 seconds from now, I'm going to know ahead of time that I have one steady shot in between this one and my aim shot. I'm going to have that planned out before I'm actually executing it. Once you've planned out all your skills and know a very general rotation for your class, you're going to want to learn the best way to use those abilities, to press the buttons. Now, the worst way to do this is actually clicking the button on your action bar. You don't want to do that. Second worst way of doing it is reacting to a finished cast. So when a cast ends, you notice that it ends and then you start another one. Now what you're doing there is the time difference between one cast and the next is latency plus your reaction time, which are probably both very significant. Another thing, this is probably the most popular way that people use their abilities, is they get a cast bar, and in the cast bar they get a latency bar, and they react to the latency bar. The reason this is also not very good is, although you take account for a lot of the latency, usually the latency is calculated at the beginning of the cast and it'll be different at the end of the cast, which is when you're pressing the next button. So the variation in latency will cause you to lose DPS. Additionally, if you happen to press your key too early or too late, you are going to lose that difference in time. The method that's going to result in the best use of global cooldowns is spamming your keys. Now, this is going to require you to have very good key bindings, keys that you spam very often, abilities that you use very often. You're going to want them in a very good position on your keyboard. A lot of people use keyboards that have macros, which will allow you to spam a key when you're holding it down. The most popular keyboard with this function is probably the Logitech G15. Those of you that don't have access to keyboards such as these, your best option is to mash keys. And if you're successful, this is what it's going to sound like. What you're really doing with this method is you're in advance accounting for any error that you will make reacting to anything. And usually this error is a lot greater than people will like to admit. So this is the best way to do it. Another tip I have is, whatever your most pressed key is, for a hunter it would be steady shot. I recommend that you, in addition to binding a key to that ability, binding it to your scroll up and scroll down on your mouse. So you could be spamming two keys at the same time for the same abilities for maximum spammage. The next thing that's going to help you make better use out of your spells is planning your movement. In a fight, you're going to have to move. That's just the reality in any fight that has any kind of mechanic in it. You're going to have to move your character. And you need to have something that you're going to be doing when you're moving. Some kind of instant cast or any ability that will either do damage or help you do damage later in the fight. For example, on a hunter, you'd have instant shots like arcane shot, aim shot, whatever. And all classes have something that you could use. Let's say on a warlock, you can always use a life tap to gain some mana back, so you wouldn't have to later in the fight, thus increasing your overall DPS. If you combine these skills, which allow you to get more spells off, and you do them very well, you're going to see a substantial increase in your DPS. I've seen boss fights where one hunter would get off 30 or 40 more global cooldowns in a 9-minute fight than another one, and such differences are not as uncommon as you think. The next step to increasing your DPS is maximizing the damage that each of those casts will do. The best way to do this is stacking your cooldowns. If you have two separate cooldowns, one which increases your damage by 10% for example, and another that increases your attack speed by 10%, if you overlap these two abilities, you'll be doing 10% more damage while attacking 10% faster. So they're going to have an effect that's going to multiply. You're going to end up doing more damage using these abilities together rather than using them separately. Now a lot of people know this, and what they do is they first get these bars that will show trinket procs or other talent procs, and they will react to these abilities going off. But what they're actually doing is they're losing the first couple seconds of these procs, and the best way to gain these seconds back is having add-ons that monitor your internal cooldowns. I use an add-on called HEATSINK, and HEATSINK will track the internal cooldowns of my trinkets when they go off. When the internal cooldown is about to finish, the trinket is usually going to proc very soon. So if I preemptively use my rapid fire, which increases my attack speed, my trinket will go off during the rapid fire, and instead of having 8 seconds of the proc, if I reacted to it, I'd have the entire 10 seconds. You're also going to want to be aware of how long the fight is going to last. You should have a good estimate before you do an encounter, and you need to be aware of things in the fight that are going to give you additional damage benefits, such as Ice Howl getting stunned in the Northern Beast encounter. You're going to want to have your cooldowns available at that point, so you could have an additional multiplier on your abilities. Also, you should have a set of cooldowns available for when Bloodlust is cast. And you're going to want to save your longer cooldowns as well as your potion for the Bloodlust. You're going to want to stack all these abilities on top of your trinkets proccing as well. From a hunter's perspective on a fight like, let's say, Jaraxxus, which is a 4-minute fight in which we Bloodlust on the second Mistress portal at about the 2-minute mark, I would use Rapid Fire at the beginning because both my trinkets at the beginning of the fight will be off internal cooldown. I'll use Readiness right off the bat because I want Readiness to provide the last Rapid Fire in the last minute of the fight for me, and I would save my second Rapid Fire for the Bloodlust, as well as stacking Call of the Wild, a potion, all on top of trinkets that are about to proc. At the 3-minute mark, when Readiness comes back up, I'd want to use Readiness so I could get an additional kill shot and then stack it on top of my cooldowns. When you stack your cooldowns on top of your trinkets in this manner, you will see that each ability that you use will have an increased average damage than if you would just use them arbitrarily. A lot of these skills that I've gone over are going to require a lot of practice, but what's more important than anything is that you are self-motivated to do more DPS than you have the previous week. You're going to find a lot of little things in an encounter which are going to allow you to do more damage. Things like learning to DPS 2 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, it's all going to be different. Using different kinds of potions, pre-potting, using things like the Headless Horseman's Blade, all these little things are going to add up to you doing the most damage that you can.